مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. مع التطورات الأخيرة في العلاقة بين الولايات المتحدة والمملكة العربية السعودية، نستضيف اليوم ديفيد راندال الدبلوماسي المخضرم الذي أمضى أكثر من 15 عاما في السعودية، ومؤلف كتاب رؤية أم سراب المملكة العربية السعودية على مفترق طرق، في محاولة لفهم ديناميكيات العلاقات الثنائية بين البلدين. ديفيد، مرحبا بك.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
بالنسبة لمشاهدينا العرب الذين لم يقرأوا كتابك بعد، هل يمكنك أن تعطينا نظرة سريعة وعامة؟
I spent 15 years in the American embassy in Riyadh, and I had many jobs there in the different sections of the embassy, and I ended up as the deputy chief of mission and then eventually as the chief of mission. And so when I retired, a lot of people told me that I had a responsibility to let that knowledge not just disappear. So I took that advice and I wrote a book, which was at first quite an encyclopedia, really just for my friends in the embassy. And then people said, no, you need to change this book and make it something that the average person who's interested and educated can still read and learn about Saudi Arabia. And I thought that was a good idea. So I wrote a book which I thought would explain Saudi Arabia and how it works and why it's important to the educated American reader. And I did that, and I think it was successful. And I explained to the people why, for many years, everyone has been saying Saudi Arabia will collapse. And if you look on my bookshelf, you will see literally dozens of books which talk about the fall of the House of Saud, the coming storm, the crisis. These are dozens of these books, and they're all wrong. And I said to myself, you know, it's time to stop asking when will Saudi Arabia collapse and start asking why is it still here and strong? And that was a much better question. And I answered that question in the book about why Saudi Arabia has defied all of the predictions that it was going to collapse. And I'll be very honest with you. I mean, when I first went to Saudi Arabia in 1980, it's a long time ago, before most of you were born, the Shah of Iran had just fallen. And the people in Washington all thought, oh my God, you know, now the Shah's gone and the king of Saudi Arabia will be next. And so they sent me out traveling around Saudi Arabia to discover what I could about when the place was going to collapse. And I came back after really a couple of years of doing that and said, you know, you got it wrong. This place is not going to collapse. This place is not Iran. And I wrote a long report about that. And I was very young, and people said, well, this guy, he's just a kid. What does he know? I think maybe the place will still collapse. But I was right, and they were wrong. And so I explained in the book why Saudi Arabia was stable. I really think there were four major reasons why Saudi Arabia is stable. The first is that the Al Saud family helped to create, they didn't help, they did create the modern kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ibn Saud, or King Abdulaziz, unified many towns and tribes and regions into a country that hadn't existed. And that gives them historic legitimacy. There are similar examples in Europe. Bismarck united Germany, Cavour united Italy. So they have a historic role in having unified the country. The second thing that they did well was they managed succession. As I don't need to tell you that in the Arab world, succession is not always smooth and peaceful. The Al Saud have managed to transfer power quickly, smoothly, peacefully, 6 times since King Abdulaziz died. And they do that very well. And that gives them, again, people look to that and they say this gives them legitimacy and it gives the country stability. The third leg of the table, if you will, is the balancing of stakeholder groups. The last leg of the table is providing competent government. Now, what do I mean by competent government? First thing is security. Both internally and externally, the Saudi people have been kept safe and secure. And when you look at many other Arab countries, with all the wars and civil wars and revolutions, the Saudi people have done extremely well. Not many of them have been killed in foreign wars. And likewise, because the government kept them safe without having wars. And likewise, with the exception of the Al-Qaeda terror campaign, which was 2003 to 2007, most of the time, the people in Saudi Arabia have been safe internally as well. And again, that's quite a change from how things were before the Al Saud came, when there was lots of crime and banditry. I mean, and people, and I wasn't there, but I have spoken to people who lived in those days, and it was quite dangerous to travel from one city to another. Even Hajis were getting robbed on their way to Mecca. So much of that is stopped. In fact, almost all of that is stopped. So they brought security. They also brought economic development, prosperity. And again, people will tell you, oh, well, that was easy because they have a lot of oil. And when you have a lot of oil, everyone will be rich. And I say, no, that's not true at all. Because you look at Nigeria. They have a lot of oil and they're not doing very well at all. Look at Iran. They have a lot of oil. They're not doing very well at all. Things have improved economically. People are happy about that. People are happy about the fact that the government has managed the oil reserves well. And that's the last thing I talk about in economics, is that Aramco is well run. I don't want to name them, but some of the other OPEC members don't run their oil industries very well. They don't invest. And if you look at the production in Saudi Arabia, it's gone up a lot over the last 20 years. There are some countries in OPEC which can't hardly produce as much oil today as they were. I'll give you a good example. Iran's a good example. I mean, they can't produce as much oil as the Shah was producing because they haven't managed their fields very well. That's just a fact. So, and the final thing, which I put under the heading of competent government, is gradual social change at a pace that most of the people will accept. When they introduced education for girls in Saudi Arabia, there were many people who objected. In fact, there were protests. The same with television. Now, if you asked today, would any Saudis like to close down the girls' schools, or would they like to shut down the television? No, they wouldn't. I don't think the majority, hardly anybody would vote for that today. But at the time, it was controversial. So slowly, they have moved to liberalize society at a pace that the majority of the people found acceptable. And I think that's been part of their success as well. And letting women drive, banning or ending much of the guardianship regulations, letting girls have sports, opening movie theaters. These are all recent examples of that change.
بالمقابل، كيف استقبل العالم الغربي كتابك الذي يقدم هذه الرؤية الإيجابية عن المملكة؟
That's a good question. People who know about Saudi Arabia have been very positive about the book. Henry Kissinger wrote a very nice comment about the book. General David Petraeus wrote a very nice comment about the book. The former head of David Petraeus was head of the American CIA, the head of the British, what they call MI6, their secret service. He wrote a very nice compliment about the book. Many ambassadors wrote compliments about the book, many journalists. All of the reviews in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times all were very praising of the book. So the book has been widely praised by a lot of people, except the people who don't like Saudi Arabia. And those people, there are a few newspapers that don't like Saudi Arabia and don't want to publish anything nice about Saudi Arabia for whatever reason. And so it hasn't, nobody has actually said anything bad about it. They just have said nothing. So I think that's been the response. The people that are knowledgeable have welcomed the book.
في الوقت الذي تقود فيه السعودية أكبر عملية تحديث اقتصادي واجتماعي وديني والتي ذكرتها في كتابك، غيرت الولايات المتحدة مسار العلاقة. هل من مفارقة هنا؟
Yeah, it's a big paradox and it's a mistake. So I feel quite strongly about that this, look, the murder or assassination of Jamal Khashoggi was a bad thing. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't happen again. I don't think it will happen again. But to say that you won't talk to the Saudis when you're more than happy to talk to the Chinese, who just shut down democracy in Hong Kong, who put thousands of Uyghurs, Muslim Uyghurs, into essentially, they call them re-education camps, but they are concentration camps of sorts. When you're more than happy to talk to, there are more journalists in prison in Turkey than there are journalists, period, in Saudi Arabia. And nobody seems to get too upset about that. So no, I'm quite, I think that it's been very unfair and selective in the sense that the Saudis have apologized for what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. They've said it won't happen again. They've said it was a mistake. My own personal view is that they didn't really intend to murder him, that they intended to, that's my personal view. I don't know that, but I think that if you were going to murder somebody, you wouldn't do it in your own embassy. So you would they probably were going to try and kidnap him. We do that. We call it rendition. Lots of countries kidnap people. They don't want to talk about it, but it happens. So any event, I think that to totally say that you're not going to talk to the Saudis because of Jamal Khashoggi is a mistake.
هل من الحكمة اعتماد هذه السياسة؟ لماذا تفكيك مثل هذا التحالف الناجح لسنوات؟
I can't answer that question for them because I don't really understand why they are doing that. There are people who, when you have a foreign policy, you have interests and you have values. The United States has values. We do stand for values. You cannot abandon your interests and you cannot abandon your values. And what you need to do is find a balance between the two. And some people don't do that. Some people are 100% for values and other people are 100% for interests. And I don't think either one of those works. So I'm not, and I should be clear, I'm not saying that the United States should abandon its values, that we should condone murders. No, but we have to balance that with our interests. Also, I would be clear to say that in the reevaluation of the relationship with Saudi Arabia, which the Biden administration has claimed that they're going to do, and they are doing, they need to focus not on blaming people for things that happened in the past, but in making sure, in judging things about the future and making sure that these things don't happen again. The United States is not a court of the world that goes around and punishes people who did a crime. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure it doesn't happen again, not to try and punish people, because that's not our job. We're not the police of the world.
ما أهم إنجازات الملك سلمان في رأيك؟
Well, I'm being very candid with you. And I realize that this is going to be listened to in Saudi Arabia, but I would say that King Salman's biggest achievement so far is managing the succession. I mentioned in the reasons that I thought Saudi Arabia was stable, one of those is the ability to manage succession from one king to another. And I don't need to tell you that that system worked in Saudi Arabia as they moved from one brother to another brother to another brother. And they shared power amongst these partners who were brothers. They were not all equal, but they shared power. That system, some people say King Salman broke that system or ended that system. I would say no, King Salman didn't end that system. That system ended itself because they ran out of brothers. There's very few brothers left. So at some point, you're going to have to go to the grandsons of King Abdulaziz. And even people like myself, who had long thought Saudi Arabia was more stable than many people assumed, recognized that that was a potentially a dangerous point. When you go to the next generation, there's a potential there for what in English they would call a Game of Thrones. There were 500 grandsons, many of whom thought that they could be king. The king effectively short-circuited the potential for a destabilizing Game of Thrones by picking one person and putting him in charge and making sure that it seemed unlikely that anyone was going to challenge that. So I think managing the succession was probably his biggest achievement so far, because without that, the whole kingdom could have become unstable. Now, he's done a lot of other things too. And the second thing I would mention, which again, people don't focus on, is fighting corruption. There was corruption, there is corruption. There's corruption in America. There's corruption in most countries. But he has clearly made an effort to reduce corruption in Saudi Arabia, and I think it's been quite effective. The businessmen I talk to, and I talked to quite a few of them, they say, that definitely there's less corruption now than there used to be. Less people asking for bribes, less people doing kickbacks. So yes, I think he's making a difference in corruption as well.
ليست الإدارة الأمريكية وحدها من ينتقد الرياض، بل الإعلام، مراكز دراسات، الأوساط الأكاديمية. هل يمكنك أن تشرح لنا السبب؟
The things that the West wants to see. They would like to see the end of the war in Yemen. They would like to see improved relations with Israel. They would like to see some sort of quiet cooperation on getting the Iranians back in some sort of a nuclear deal. These are the things that the Biden administration is looking for. To the extent that you can help them on those things, they would be grateful. I have written and I have said that the Saudis that they want to end the war in Yemen. They don't need, and I wrote this, I said, cutting off arms sales to Saudi Arabia is not going to make them want to stop the war in Yemen anymore. They would like that war to end. Cutting off arms sales to them is just going to make the Houthis feel stronger and think, well, now the Americans aren't going to support the Saudis, so why should we make a deal? So I wrote a couple articles where I said that was a mistake. It doesn't help end the war, and it definitely doesn't make the Saudis any more willing to end the war than they already are.
كيف يمكن للسعودية أن تعيد ترتيب علاقاتها السياسية مع الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية؟
One, they can explain themselves better on all scores. That means, why did we put people in jail? We should explain that. But also they need to explain more about all the good things that they're doing. Every time I have one of these talks and I tell people, girls used to not be able to go to sports. Girls used to not be able to go to football games. They couldn't have gym classes. Now they can. People say, really? Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I'm a speaker who's bringing them some news that they never heard of. That shouldn't be my job. That should be the job of the Saudi government to help explain these things, that all the good things that they are achieving, which is many, and they have problems. And they should acknowledge the problems as well. But they have achieved a lot, and that should be made clearer.
كيف ترى مستقبل العلاقة السعودية الإيرانية مع الموقف الجديد لإدارة بايدن؟
I have been looking for the so-called Iranian moderates for 25 years, and I haven't found them yet. So everybody keeps telling me that there's these Iranian moderates. I don't think so. I think the Iranians wish to dominate. They believe that it's their right to dominate the region. They would like to drive the West, and particularly the United States, out of the region. They have said more than once that they would like to get rid of Israel. And people say, oh, they don't really mean that. I'm not sure they don't really mean that. I think when people say something repeatedly, you should start to believe them. I do not, I think that the Iranian Revolution is evolving, that the religious leaders are going to fade in their influence, and the Revolutionary Guard is going to become more powerful than they already are, that they're essentially becoming like the Communist Party or the Nazi Party or the Ba'ath Party, in that they have control of the politics of the country and they have control of the economy. They have many different businesses that they run. So I think that really the people running Iran in the future are going to be the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and they are not particularly prone to wanting to compromise. I do not criticize the Obama administration for the nuclear deal. I did not think that it was going to work because I didn't think the Iranians would really, and plus it said that in 12 years they could build a bomb anyway. So, but I didn't think it was going to work, but I applauded Obama for trying, or at least I gave him credit for trying, because we didn't know that for sure. I mean, I've just told you that I didn't really trust the Iranians, but I could have been wrong. Yeah. Obama tried to trust the Iranians, and I don't think that he should be faulted for trying. I think it was a good thing that he tried, because we would like to have peace. But the Iranians didn't really respond very favorably. They continued to disrupt the countries around them with their proxy armies, most notably in Yemen, but also in Iraq, also in Lebanon, different places, even Hamas, which is not Shia, obviously, but they have a relationship there. So they didn't respond favorably. So, and we did a lot. I think Obama bent over backwards trying to bring them back into the family of nations. He tried very hard. I mean, he lifted sanctions. He sent them literally plane loads of money. And they didn't start changing the way they were behaving much. So I think it's kind of naive to try it again. I've had this discussion with people who supported the nuclear deal, and they will tell you that the Iranians would have behaved nicely and they would have joined the family of nations if we just gave them more time. But Trump didn't give them enough time. That's like the people who tell me that, communism was really going to work in Russia, just we needed to give them more time. I don't think so. I think they had enough time, and if they wanted to behave differently, they had an opportunity to do that. So I don't buy that argument. I think there are a lot of people in the Obama administration who are now in the Biden administration who believe in this and who want to try and make it revive it.
سبق وقلت إن تكلفة عدم إقامة السعودية علاقات مع إسرائيل قد ارتفعت. هل ما زلت تؤمن بهذا ولماذا؟
What are the benefits of having a relationship with Israel? You can have trade, you can have investment, you can have tourism, you can have security relationships. Those things didn't really matter to Saudi Arabia 30 years ago. They didn't need tourists, they didn't want tourists. They had plenty of trade and investment from other places. Now they're trying to get investment. Now they're trying to get technology transfer. Israel can provide many of those things, and they certainly can cooperate in security. And so, yes, the benefits of having a relationship with Israel have definitely gone up and increased significantly. So not having so you pay a bigger price for not having a relationship with Israel.
هل تعتقد أن رؤية 2030 قابلة للتحقيق؟
Yes, part of it. I mean, I've said it before. Probably they should call it Vision 2050, But if they made it 2050, nobody would pay attention. They would say, oh, that's for my grandson, 2050, that's a long ways away. So I think, it's a plan. It's a well thought out plan. It's a far more, it's not ambitious. The ideas have been there for a while, but it's a far more organized and structured plan. So I think that much of it is very achievable. Yes, it's a difficult goal to achieve quickly, but they're making progress in the right direction. And I think that's obvious that they have made quite a lot of progress in the right direction. There are some things are more difficult than others. The social changes are profound and very real. The economic changes are coming more slowly, but those are also, I think, real and doable. It's not easy to transform an oil-based economy into a normal economy, if you will. That takes time. It takes effort. It takes sacrifice from the people as well. So, but I do think it's an optimistic plan. I think it's doable. Much of it's doable, not perhaps all of it. What has changed is the focus of the government. Some of these ideas have been around for a long time, but the government was not organized in a way to execute them. And now the government is much better organized. Now there's a central plan and everybody is paying attention to it, and money is being distributed based on how well you support that plan. And people are checking to see whether you're meeting your key performance indicators or not. That's all quite new. And there's a much greater discipline. So I think that there's a much better chance that this plan will succeed than the previous ones.
بالعودة إلى كتابك في ختام هذا الحوار، هل لك أن تختصر لنا ما قلته عن ولي العهد السعودية؟
I repeated what Tom Friedman said in one of his articles in the New York Times. That if you think there are 12 other princes in Riyadh who are as clever and ambitious, and he used the word ruthless, as Mohammed bin Salman, you're wrong. There aren't. He is an exceptional person in that he is able to get a lot of things done. And I think that's true. And Tom Friedman said that, and I would agree with Tom Friedman, that this person has abilities which the average person doesn't have, that he has a very forceful personality, and that is what is needed in order to get a lot of these things done. And so I think that's very helpful. Some people may not like all the things he's doing. I'm sure no one likes everything he's doing. And he has obviously angered some people whose interests are not being supported by some of the things he's doing. But I don't think that many other people could have pushed Vision 2030 or the social changes as far or as fast as he has.
شكرا ديفيد لمشاركتك في حوارات السياق.
And thank you for having me on.
شكرا لطيب المتابعة. إلى اللقاء.